What does human resources mean? Human resources are the human capital or people who work toward achieving the goals and mission of the organization. Human resource management, also called HRM, is really employee management with an emphasis on thinking about those employees as assets of the business. As with other business assets, the goal is to make effective use of employees, reducing risk, and maximizing return on investment. Areas of human resource management oversight include employee recruitment and retention, exit interviews, motivation, assignment selection, labor law compliance, performance reviews, training, professional development, mediation, and change management. We will be addressing these concepts throughout this presentation, and we hope that you will find it a fantastic resource for hiring your first employee. Please take a moment to click on the video screen and learn about how Jack Welch, former CEO and chairman of GE, looks at how to manage people. Under Welch's leadership, the value of GE rose 4,000%, so he might have some really excellent tips to think about the ways that you can look at people as part of your team and as a real, genuine resource for the company. Now we'd like you to watch a brief clip about human resources from Steve Jobs, CEO of Apple's perspective. Jobs has a little bit of a different mindset than Jack Welch does, but both are absolute visionary leaders, so it would be interesting for you to have a look in this very brief presentation. It might be helpful for you to think about the human resource function as a circular process. So after you recruit and select employees, that really is just the beginning. From that point on, it's important to look at things like engagement and retention. Are employees happy where they're at? Is this an organization that they understand and they want to work in? At the same time that we look at employees' needs, we also need to keep focused on the needs of the organization. And we have to manage performance. We have to make sure that employees understand what the policies and procedures are and how we can best communicate this information to them. So some of the ways that we can do that are through training and development, which is the next block on the circular diagram. Some of the other things in training and development, especially when it comes to a food-based business, is looking at food handling regulations and making sure that all of your employees have access to this training and that they can really perform the way that you're looking for them to do. And then the final component that we're going to look at is workforce planning. Do we have enough employees to meet the needs of the business? Do we need to hire extra people? Should we schedule shorter shifts? How many people are showing up? Is there an absentee issue? All of these things all fit into the human resources function, which is really a circular process. So just to give an example, if you wanted to hire a new server, one of the things that you might do is if you hang a sign up and somebody comes in and you have 25 job applications and you select the employee, that's not the end of the human resource function, right? Because we have to make sure that the new employee feels like they're part of the team and that they understand the roles and responsibilities of their job description. From there, one of the things that we can do when we look at performance management is to think about the ways in which we give feedback to employees. How many times do you think that it's appropriate to tell an employee how to do something? Are you going to give a demonstration? Is it in written form on how to get employees to understand what it is that you want to do? So sometimes when it comes to training and development, you'll have an employee in a role and you realize pretty quickly that the person's not going to be successful in that role. That doesn't mean that they won't be successful in your business, and it might be a possibility to move them around. So some of the skills and the traits that you saw in the job interview doesn't necessarily mean you have a bad hire. You just may have a bad fit for the position. And that's where workforce planning comes into place too. You might have to move people around. And again, you might have to adjust schedules. You might have times that are peak, like a Saturday night, when you have to bring in extra employees to make sure that the operation flows. And all of these things are just part of managing the people that are in your company. So one of the best ways to get started with your recruitment and selection needs is to take some time to sit down and look at job descriptions. So one way that you might be able to organize your thoughts in this area would be to take and break down all the responsibilities that are involved in running your operation on a daily basis. From there, you can cluster those responsibilities together in areas where it makes sense, and to do your best to make sure that people are, if it's a full-time employee, that they have 8 hours of work that is going to be work where they can contribute to the overall success of the company. So job descriptions are a great place to start. If you don't know what you want, it's going to be very hard for your employees to understand how they're going to meet your outcomes and your vision for your company. So then the next thing that we need to take a look at is advertising. How do we get word out about the jobs that are available? Next thing we'll look at is interviews. So what are some things that we should do during the interview process, and what are some of those things that we shouldn't do? And then we're going to take a look at some of the paperwork that's involved in getting an employee onboarded and maintaining personnel files. Okay, so when we go back to looking at job descriptions, when we take a look at things like how do we put this together, what are some of the most important pieces of this, it's people like job titles. That's important to them, and the job title should definitely be reflective of what you expect from your employees. It is, in my opinion, very important to make sure that your employees are clear about what their job title is so that they're able to share that information accurately, because the last thing that you'd want is somebody, using a job title that is not really aligned with what their responsibilities are, because that can lead to internal confusion and external confusion as well. For example, if you had a waiter that was telling folks that they were a manager and your customers thought that this was somebody that was in a decision-making capacity, that it might be something that had a negative impact on your business. Another thing in a job description that's pretty important is to let people know how many hours they can expect to work in the position and when those hours might be. For example, does the job start at 8 a.m., does it start at noontime, or does it start at 6 o'clock p.m.? So if you share those hours that you're expecting people to come in, it's a little bit easier for people to self-select and to know which jobs to apply for. So again, the next thing we're going to look at is a summary of duties. What are the individual tasks that are going to make this person successful during the day? When we take a look at coming up with a summary of duties and these tasks, it's really important as a manager to think about the ways in which you're going to evaluate how successful somebody is in completing these duties. So then functional and relational responsibilities, so that the employee understands how their performance impacts the rest of the operation. This is really a key thing. For instance, if you had somebody working in your kitchen, and even if it was their only role was to make salads, and you could say, oh, well, that's just somebody that's easily replaceable or whatever have you. If that person should have low performance on a particular night, it's going to impact about every single customer within the organization. So for that person to be able to understand how they play into the overall mission and to take pride in in that function that they're completing is a really great way to keep people motivated. So methods used to complete these tasks: what kind of training do you need to supply people with? Is it a handbook? Is it a checklist? Is it a video training? Do you need live training or a demonstration? So those are some of the things that you can take a look at. Qualifications needed for the job. If you need somebody that needs specialized training, experience, things like that, it's best to articulate this on the front end so that you get the most appropriate pool of applicants that you can for the job. If you're looking for a chef that might have experience cooking, or they have formal training, and everybody that shows up for the job doesn't have either, you probably haven't done a really done a good job explaining what qualifications are there for the job. I think many people think that salary is an area that you should stay away from. Again, it's just my opinion. I think it's a really good idea to put the salary range there so that people can understand whether this is a job that they would accept in the long term or not. I think it becomes a waste of your time if you're interviewing people that won't accept the amount of money that you're willing to offer them. So I think it's a good idea to include salary range. Another topic that you don't see in many job descriptions or in the advertisement itself is a little description of the culture of the organization. I think increasingly as we move into the 21st century, really into it, I think helping employees understand what the culture of the organization really defines how you can help people be successful. Is it an innovative company? Is it a fast-paced organization? Is it a conservative organization? Is it a get-along organization? Well, this way most people are, I think, pretty self-aware that they can say, wow, that's some environment that I'd be able to thrive in or not, because that's ultimately what you're looking to do. You're looking for all of your employees to thrive. Take a look at the culture of Starbucks operation. The employees are absolutely considered partners where they're there. There's a huge value on diversity, on teamwork, on working together, and on making sure that the customer's experience is second to none. So if you know that that's an important part of that culture of that organization, if you really are not that focused on people and your people skills aren't that great, you can sit there and say, wow, this is not particularly a company that I want to go to work for. And if you have any equipment that you need folks to operate, now is also a really good time to share that. So again, what you're looking for is the most qualified group of people that you can get to evaluate to move on to the next level. Okay, when you're talking about advertising and looking for help, what are some of the ways that you can get your needs out there in front of the most amount of people? So there are many online opportunities out there and forums. Things like Monster come immediately to mind. Indeed is another place that you can go to. Simply Hired. These are all places that you can advertise. If you're a large company, it's probably a good idea. Similarly, you can advertise on CalJobs or work with your workforce investment board in your area to see if they have any qualified candidates to come work for you. Social media, if you're looking for employees that are under 30, this is probably going to be one of your strongest recruitment tools. And there are specialized platforms that are set up like LinkedIn that you can share a huge amount of information about your company, and people can look through it and you can see who's actually looking through. If you're starting out with a smaller operation, it might be very appropriate just to hang up a sign that says help wanted and people are going to walk in. Referrals are great. If you have a really good employee, what you'll find many times, and in my experience owning a business, many of my best employees brought the next wave of best employees in, whether it was a family member or a good friend of theirs, because people that hang out together typically have a shared set of values. And the last way to think about it, and this is not a comprehensive list, but this is the most common way that you're going to go about getting new employees, is poaching employees. And by poaching employees, what I mean there is if you go into an establishment and you have outstanding customer service, it's totally appropriate to ask the person, or share information and say, listen, I'm opening up a new business. I just want to let you know that you've been really great and this experience has been outstanding. And I'd like you to think about coming down and filling out a job application for me. And you could also tell the person, it might not be now that you have availability, it could be in the future, but building those relationships and networking with a pool of employees who are strong are going to be a really fantastic value for your business. So when it comes to the job application and the interview process, there are several different demographics and psychographics about people that are really off limits. You cannot ask people about their race or age, religion, their ethnicity, where they were born, if they have any disabilities, marital status, how many children they have in the course of the job application. You can ask people, many times you'll see with companies, they do ask people about disclosing and self-disclosing information about race and disabilities, but this cannot be part of your job selection process. In my opinion, I think it's a good thing to stay away from even those disclosures, especially if you're a small operation, because you really don't want to move into an area that somebody can say that you were biased against them when they're getting hired. And, I mean, in an area that we live in Solano County, we're absolutely a melting pot. So diversity should really be something that is important to your team so that your staff it can really build your business and be brand ambassadors and something that they can be proud of. So would it be okay to say, what year did you graduate high school during an interview? And the answer is no, that would be an inappropriate question. Could you ask somebody, can you tell me where your parents live or what country you were born in? Again, that's a question that's off limits. Asking a woman, are you pregnant? Do you have children? What are your plans for childcare once you get this job? All of those questions are absolutely off limits. A good suggestion is, if you think that the question is even somewhat controversial, it's probably a good idea not to ask that question. So the next thing I'd like to talk about a little bit is the interview process and where that might start. So it's likely to start with an application. Many companies today have digitized all of their applications, so it's something online. Sometimes when you go into some of the larger retailers, they actually have a kiosk in place for people to fill out their applications. This might not be practical as you start up your new business, and it's totally acceptable to have a paper application. You should think long and hard about those questions that you want to answer have answered on your applications, and just be really mindful about the questions that you can't ask about. So again, things like your age, religion, country of birth, disabilities, race, number of children, if any, marital status, all really strong questions to stay away from. So the next thing after the application is you need to figure out how you're going to evaluate applications against each other. So if you have 20 applications in front of you, it's probably not practical to interview all 20 people. Maybe if you're just starting out, you might be hiring a large pool of people. But how are you going to know when somebody comes in is successful? That also plays into the next question about multiple perspectives. Personally, I think it's a really good idea to have more than one person involved in an interview so that you can gain a different perspective. There are a lot of things to interview in a short period of time during a job interview. Not only are you looking for the verbal responses, things like body language and how somebody carries themselves is also really important, especially when it comes to a customer focus-based business like food startups. So then you have to think about too, is this going to be are you going to decide in the first round, just have one round of interviews, or you going to use a couple of people the first time and spend more in depth with an individual on the second round? A bad hire can wreak havoc in an organization. That it's expensive to get somebody trained, and it's even more expensive to have somebody around that doesn't buy into the overall operation and goal. So even though it might seem like a lot to schedule 2 rounds of interviews, it might be a really good idea to have a second round that is more in depth. And you might even want to think about things and asking people to do demonstrations and things like that and role play with you. Reference checks are also highly recommended. What did this person's past supervisor say about their performance? You might ask them for a colleague. You might just spot check and ask, is there anybody else that I could talk to that worked with John Jones while he was at your organization, and see if you can learn more about the person's character. Good new methodology too is to take a look at LinkedIn and see if you share any of the same connections, and if you do, you might be able to gain some insight, because again, offering a job to somebody that's not going to fit in or be successful, it can cost your business more than just in the hiring process. So after you've gone first round, second round, and you perform reference checks, the next thing that you're going to do is make an offer. At the time that you make an offer, you really need to share a job description, a compensation base, what hours the person's going to be expected to work. And then finally, you're looking for acceptance, that you want people to say, yes, thank you very much. I also see myself fitting in with this culture here. As we've shared earlier in some of the slides, it's really positive piece of your business to make sure that you have policies in place. It's really important that you keep all of your records in relationship to um, your employee records for at least 4 years. It's also very important to make sure that these records are handled with the utmost confidentiality. One tip that I can offer you is anytime a social security number has to be shared, it never should be shared via email. Um, it's something that you might want to create a policy about and an awareness at your company to make sure that you're protecting your employees. And really understanding on how to comply with standards for employee rights in regards to things like equal opportunity and standards like fair labor, and following statutes for things like minimum wage, child labor, overtime, and making sure that you're compensating your employees accurately are extremely important. It might be a good investment for you to spend about $10 and find a poster, an all-in-one employment poster that you can post for all the employees, because many of the things, if not all, that you see on the poster to your right are mandated requirements that need to be posted. So by buying something that's laminated and putting it in a place by like a time clock or a break room where people can access it are extremely important. So when we take a look at the things that we need to post, many of them you can, if you want to, you can just contact the Division of Labor Standards Enforcement and they'll send you a free poster. So things that you need to address, like minimum wage order, payday notice, so when are people going to get paid, the Cal OSHA forms that outline on-the-job injuries and illnesses and what employees need to do. Harassment and discrimination, big thing. It's very important to train your employees proactively about what sexual harassment is. Many times young people they think that they're having fun and joking around and they don't understand the lines that they're crossing there. Notice it about disability benefits and unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, safety, injury and illness prevention. All of these things need to be displayed. So some of the records that you need to keep in your HR department, one of the very first things that you need to do is get yourself an employee identification number. And this is going to allow you to track your business throughout the entire federal system and the state system. The next step should be set up some way to collect employee information, not only collect it, but actually organize it. So like on the way in, an employee has to fill out a W-4, which lets an employer know how many deductions must be coming out of the check, some basic information about the employee, like their name, their social security number, and their address. Again, really important to keep this information confidential. The next record that you'll be required to supply employees with is a W-2. So this comes to an employee every year, and it has to be given to them by the 31st of January. Otherwise, you potentially have some liability there. And this will allow an employee a very brief summary about all the taxes that they've paid. State taxes, so here in California, you'll have to set up a system for making sure that's paid. We also need to look at I-9s, which are the employee eligibility verification. And there's this IRS offers a site for E-Verify so that you can make sure that the worker is legally able to work in the state. The next thing you need to do is register with the state's new hire program and let them know that you've hired new employees. We need to consider workman's compensation, and to me this is a non-negotiable. I know a lot of times people think in the beginning they're going to skim some costs and they're going to pay people cash and they won't have to deal with the taxes and every other thing. I can tell you that it's an enormous mistake to do this. God forbid somebody ever gets hurt on the job. You have more liability than you could ever realize. And the other part of the equation, it's illegal to pay people in cash. There is no statute of limitations on defrauding the United States government from taxes paid. So you could wind up with a very successful business and somebody could cut you. You finally get caught, and it's just not worth it. It's bad business practices. Again, make sure you file the required notices and that you're paying payroll taxes like your Social Security and Medicare, your state, what your obligations are to the state and to the federal in a very timely manner. If this is something that you feel like overwhelmed by, it may be a potential for you to secure a payroll company. There are plenty of them out there, and you could just use Google to evaluate the positives and the negatives. So when you're assigning employees to a different role in your company, some of the things that you might want to take a look at is what their skills and experiences are, what they've already done, and what they're interested in. It might be a really good tactic, especially if your company is, your restaurant startup or food-based startup is very small, would be to cross-train your employees so that people can step in. In a food-based business, there are definitely going to be peak times that are very demanding, and where you can utilize your team to jump in and help each other out to make your operation go more smoothly, it's definitely going to be an asset to your overall outcomes. When you take a look at the group of employees that are going to work for you, there are many different ways that people are motivated. Some people are motivated by the fact that they're going to make more money, and that's what they're interested in. They could care less what their job title is or what that you ask them to do, the hours or the demands of the job. They're just motivated. The more money that they can make, the harder they're going to work for you. Then you have other folks that will work for you that are more motivated by a job title. They want to know that I am the manager on duty, or I'm the supervisor of the salad line, or that I am the head waiter, or some other title that you can give them. So some people are motivated by that, and they're not so motivated by the money. Other people are motivated by the fact that they feel like they can belong into the work group and part of the team. So these are the things that you need to consider when you're interacting with people, because people are not all going to perform to the top of your standards based on the same reward system. So if I had John, Sally, and Jose, John might be really happy to have a steady paycheck, and he gets a schedule, and he really is not motivated beyond that. He just wants to take care of his basic needs. Sally, on the other hand, likes to come to work because she feels like she can belong to the group. And Jose, what he really wants, he's motivated by two things. He wants a job title and he wants money. And sometimes it can be the cross-section and interaction of both. But more importantly, Jose wants to make sure that he can keep working and that he can keep going up the hierarchy of needs, and that his job is a place that gives him confidence and makes him respected by others, and makes him, more importantly, respect himself and to take some pride in what his job is. It's really a good idea to have a focused approach on retaining good employees. So good employees look for certain things. They want new opportunities to grow and learn. They're looking for feedback. They want to improve. They're looking for professional development. They want their view valued. They want to see where they can contribute to the company and the organization. And, you know, sometimes people work in the backgrounds, but it always is important to give that recognition and to make people feel valued. Those people that go above and beyond to make the organization flow smoother are the people that are generating income for your business. So where you can give feedback and let people understand about how much you do value their work, but what they could absolutely do better, and getting people to understand that it's not, you know, picking on them or not negative. It's just about working to hone the processes and to make the organization run great. So it's a good idea to have some informal feedback, like short, brief conversations, and even more important would be a written evaluation. And that should include specific examples of how an employee can improve their performance. One of the hardest parts of managing employees are when the performance level gets to the point of termination. So some of the things that I'd like to share about this as you lead up to a potential termination, it is extremely important to document as many instances as you can of behavior that's not acceptable to the mission of the organization. So things like perpetual lateness, not just a person showing up late one day, but a person that shows up late 20 times during a month. It's not okay to say, hey, listen, I know that this person shows up late all the time. You need to come up with dates and times and keep detailed information. The other piece that you really need to look at before you terminate an employee is it's really important to make sure that you've been clear with the employee about your expectations. What is it that you expect? So as long as you take the time to sit down and share that with the employee so that the person is given the benefit of the doubt, because sometimes we just jump right into things and we don't explain things as well as we wished we did. So, I mean, it can be a great preemptive move with somebody that you already have in place to just say, hey, listen, let's sit down and do a re-education or a retraining process. Something else that, termination, insubordination is another one. When an employee refuses to do what the employer asks, it would be another grounds for termination. Stealing is another one. It's a really good idea. Sexual harassment, egregious sexual harassment would be another thing that you could be terminated for. So one thing, again, as I started sharing in the beginning, it's really important to document things, right? And to keep giving the employee ongoing opportunities to improve their performance. So, and my suggestion to you would be to have the conversations with an employee informally and let them know as soon as you possibly see that there could be any issues. Say, listen, I'm the one that hired you, or the company values you. Keep it framed up positive, but then don't send a mixed message. Say, we're really proud you're part of our team, but what we would like you to do is to think about these ways that you can improve the organization, and this is the answer why. So, an example, if you have an employee that typically comes in late, suppose they're scheduled to start at 10:30 for an 11 o'clock luncheon, and they typically come in at 1:30, then it's pretty easy to sit down and say to the person, listen, this isn't going to work out. And if you keep moving forward with that type of behavior. So it's important for you to be here at 10:30 so you can help prep and help us set up the tables and get food in place before you're actually on the floor taking orders. And when you're not here, the impact on the organization is everybody else has to work harder. And the impact on me as a manager, I'm sort of reluctant to schedule you because I'm not sure if you're going to show up on time. So do you think that we can try tomorrow to make sure that you're here at 10:30 at your scheduled time? So having conversations with people like that is totally appropriate before you get to the place of termination. When it comes to termination, I could tell you my recommendation is you don't do it by email or letter, although some people opt to do it that way. I think it's a conversation. I think you need to be sensitive to the other person's needs. I think it's great if you can point out what the skills and the characteristics that you've enjoyed working with that person, and that they might be able to look for future opportunities in that area, and to give some final feedback about that. Another thing that you might want to do as people leave your organization, whether it is through termination or people do resign, is kind of capture some data and information about why people are leaving. Because again, if you can capture and you understand why you're having problems, those are things that you can totally fix. Okay, so change management and how this plays into the human resource function. Change management is really about ripening up the environment and getting people to understand that change is really good for the organization. If organizations just stayed stagnant and they weren't constantly moving and evolving, we probably still wouldn't be driving an automobile, right? We would be back with horses and dependent on, ancient technologies. So being forward-thinking, seeing opportunities, making people feel comfortable that they can go ahead and that they can, be innovative and do different things around the company, and make sure that that company is operating at maximum performance is really what change management is all about. So, for instance, if you had a food truck and that you were always in delivering in the morning and the sales were kind of mediocre, and you decided I'm going to switch to the afternoon, and all of a sudden sales go through the roof, And you might have to use the people that are employed in your business in a little different capacity. I don't know without taking a look at a solid business plan, but you might want to use things like social media to alert people that your food truck is coming and things like that that you might not have done in the morning. Thank you very much for joining us here at the Solano Small Business Development Center and for this presentation on Human Resources 101. So this is your basic information that you're going to need to start thinking about how you're going to develop a human resource operation for your business. At the SBDC, we absolutely have advisors and specialists who can work with you to take all of this information to the next level and to help you organize this information for your company. Without a doubt, we really need to thank the City of Fairfield and the City of Vallejo for making sure that we're able to provide this wonderful opportunity for you to go through these webinars and to learn basic information and to educate yourself on how you can run the best business that you possibly can. If you have any questions, please feel free to call the Solano SBDC at 707-864-3382. Thank you very much and have a really fantastic day or evening. And best of luck to you as you take on your new endeavor.